Is the R9 270X still a viable option in 2020? Let's find out today. So this is the R9 270X, which was originally released in October of 2013. This card was based on the 28nm process, and this card supports up to DirectX 12. There are two variants of this card. So this card right now is the 2GB version, but there is also a 4GB version floating around. This Asus card comes clocked at 1220 MHz on the boost clock and 1400 MHz on the GDDR5 memory. The original MSRP of this card back in 2013 was around $350 from what I could find. This card came equipped with two DVI ports, one HDMI out, and a DisplayPort out. It also requires additional power using two 6-pin connectors. I did pick up this card for just $15, which I thought was a bargain. I threw this card in my system, which has an FX 8350 with an ASRock motherboard and 16GB of RAM. I couldn't max out the 8350 in any of the games. I did use Radeon Relive to capture all of my benchmarks. This impacted the performance about 3 to 5 FPS, so just keep that in mind when comparing other benchmarks. This card was also left at stock speeds. So let's get into the benchmarks. So the first game we tested was everybody's favorite, Fortnite. So I tried this game on all different settings at 1080p with 100% resolution scale. So on low we got around a 100 FPS average. On medium settings we got 80 FPS average. On high we got a 50 FPS average. This is where we started to encounter stuttering, but it wasn't that bad. It was still playable. But on epic with a 27 FPS average there was major stuttering. I tried the mix settings with everything on medium and textures on high and view distance on epic. We achieved a 60 FPS average. So if you were using this card to play, I would recommend these mix settings. Next, we tried Apex Legends. This is where the R9 270X started to struggle a bit due to its 2GB of VRAM. We were playing with all low settings and we saw around a 50 FPS average, but when we were jumping off the ship, it was around a 30 FPS, and it was kind of stuttery, but not to the point where it was unplayable. So once I tried to bump up the settings to medium, it would start to stutter like crazy and become unplayable. So if you are choosing this card to play Apex Legends, you would be stuck on low settings at 1080p. And next up was Warzone, and this actually kind of surprised me. On low settings, I was able to get a 50 FPS average with this card. Again, it was held back due to its 2GB of VRAM. But with high and low mixture, I was able to get a 37 FPS average, which is okay, but it was kind of unplayable due to the stuttering. So again, you would be stuck on low settings, but you would be able to play at a smooth 50 FPS. And probably the easiest game to run was CSGO, and not surprisingly on all maxed out settings at 1080p, I was able to get a 108 FPS average on the benchmark, which is actually harder to run than the actual game itself. So while I was in game, I was looking at around a 120 FPS average to 130, but this game is definitely playable on this card, and I would recommend this card if you were wanting to just play CSGO. Lastly, we had GTA 5. I used the in-game benchmark for this game, and I was able to get a 60 FPS average on all high settings. We were even hitting around 80 FPS, but during those explosions we were down to about 48, 47. But this game is again very playable on this card. So after testing this card in some modern games, and keeping in mind this card is 7 years old, it performed better than I expected. It was able to play most games at decent settings at 60 FPS. It however lagged behind in the more demanding titles like Warzone and Apex due to the only 2GB of VRAM. But in the end, it depends on your budget. If you're looking for a cheap card that can play games right now, like I picked this card up for $15 and it was a bargain at that price, and you don't mind turning down the settings a little bit, I would recommend it. And finally, thank you for watching. And remember to leave a like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you like these type of videos and how I can improve them, because I'm really trying to put up my standards, I guess. And as always, thank you for watching. Peace!